You are looking at the Ebola virus. It's a large virus, as you can tell. This is a artistic rendition or interpretation. Um, this virus has been around for millennia. They have found it in fossilized remains of rodents, even. They can trace the lineage quite nicely. They know where it branched off in the evolutionary tree. It evolves much more slowly than anything compared to adenovirus and compared to influenza. This thing doesn't mutate very quickly. It is not spread through airborne transmission. If it was, the chimpanzees would be wiped out, and you would see malaria type numbers, influenza type numbers, and it's not the gruesome thing that it's been made out to be, but it is not a nice disease, and it kills most of its victims. Ebola has been found in just remote areas, and when you look at the clusters that break out, they're very well contained. It doesn't spread. They find a lot of bats contaminated with Ebola, and they find a lot of primates. Pigs are especially susceptible. The primate population would not be around if it was spread through hand contact or airborne contact. It's hard for humans to transmit to other humans because you become so sick so soon. It's impossible to exchange body fluids with very many people until you start developing symptoms. There is a prodromal or preclinical stage where you might be able to pass it through body fluids. But you do not hemorrhage like people think you hemorrhage. These are micro hemorrhages. This is bruising. You normally don't bleed. And if this thing was an airborne pathogen, this chimpanzee would probably not even be sitting here today. It's not easily transmitted. It's the same classification of bloodborne pathogens such as hepatitis B, hepatitis C, HIV. The animal transition, the animal vectors are similar to rabies. So Ebola does not spread, and if you see a widespread incidences, it's very, very suspicious of weaponization. I'm not saying that people are suffering from weaponized Ebola, but this is not a disease that you would quarantine anybody for because the transmission is body fluids only. If this thing was really a threat, half of Africa would just be a mess. If it spread like influenza, it would be the most grotesque thing on the planet Earth, but it doesn't do this. And it hasn't so for probably millions of years. So anything that's virulent that requires a quarantine is either hoax or it's weaponized. And that's the bottom line, and there's no other alternatives. Even hand contact is suspicious. It's hard to pass this thing along, but body fluids are contaminated, so you would want to be very careful. And this disease likes all kinds of tissue. The main vectors are primates and bats, even fruit bats, oddly enough, which don't come in contact with blood products that often. So it makes you wonder what the deal is with the fruit bats. That's something worth looking into, but in the United States, I venture a guess that the death rate would drop because of the improved medical condition. You should see some of the conditions these people have to go and live in when they're sick. This disease, the virus, is so large. It's one of the most photographic viruses on the planet that we know of, and it's very detailed. They make these globulins, which then shut down your immune system. They attack the macrophages, which are the very primary driver of an immune response. So when you shut off the immune response early in the chain reaction, you get no immune response. So then what happens is these viruses embed in the cell, cause tremendous amount of inflammation to where a secondary immune system, the non-viral immune system, because remember the viral immune system is suppressed, the non-viral immune system takes over, and those cells, those white blood cells, are far more destructive of tissue than the lymphocytes, which make antibodies. So the antibacterial cells that end up attacking the tissue have highly caustic and highly some of them are really highly alkaline substances, peroxides even. So don't buy into the scare tactics. There's no threat. This disease cannot be spread. If we know a person has it, cannot be spread that easily, that fast. So that's your clue if something's fishy going on with Ebola, because it's a bloodborne pathogen. Imagine hepatitis C being passed through air contact. Imagine HIV being spread through air contact. That's the kind of mutation you would need. The concern about pigs is real. You should Google pig die-off or flu kills pigs, and millions. We're talking metric tons of pigs have died due to a viral illness. So, things are getting a little interesting. We have some severe concerns about what's going around on the internet regarding how to treat Ebola. I think we've been misquoted just off of a thread. Some people say take 500,000 milligrams of vitamin C. You cannot possibly do that. You would tear a hole in your stomach if you took that much vitamin C. The most vitamin C I've seen anybody tolerate is about 50,000 milligrams orally, spread out 3 to 4 doses a day, taken in buffered form and with food. So if you do anything else and use something that's not timed release or not buffered, your tolerance is going to be even less. This disease mimics a lot of other hemorrhagic fevers. Look up malaria, but the skin lesions are by far the most prominent and most notorious, looking like smallpox, bruising. This is the hemorrhage that they're talking about. Nobody's bleeding all over the place, so get that out of your mind, that doesn't happen. The treatments for such a things, you may wonder, if we're expecting a pandemic of weaponized Ebola. I would like to think not, but I do want to tell you that gamma globulin has been in short supply, and there was times in the last 2 years where the gamma globulin supply completely ran out, and the doctors and hospitals ran 3 weeks behind on ordering of gamma globulin. So this stuff is antiviral, and they give it when you're exposed to serious things. So you really can't take too much gamma globulin. Good luck in getting a doctor to give it to you. Vitamin C is another thing that we're going to talk about. Look like influenza. So it's really important that you understand all of this and understand that this virus is not a cause for any type of quarantine. If there's a mutated form of this disease, it would be highly unlikely because it's been around for millions of years, they think, and it's completely possible to find these huge viruses in the fossil record just because they're so large. It's a large virus. They've worked on vaccines, and I believe they have vaccines, and the vaccines against Ebola have been given to healthcare workers that work in that environment, that are studying, and trust me, there are people there collecting viruses for the specific purpose of a vaccine. One person comes into this country with this disease, and it's known, it's almost virtually impossible in the United States of America to transmit that disease. healthcare workers all know how to protect themselves against blood and body fluid. There is absolutely no evidence that it's transmitted through the air. The transmission through the oral route is a big controversy, and you need to probably look at the number of pigs that have died in the United States alone. Worldwide, it's even worse, and it makes you wonder how all of a sudden major sources of food suddenly die by the millions from a virus that you've never heard of, and then it's doing it by the tons. I mean, you're talking about tons and tons of pigs dying. So that brings in the most controversial aspect of this video. But if something does go funny, you know that it's highly unlikely to be something that occurred naturally. I've become very suspicious of the Center for Disease Control. I really have, and that's just my personal opinion. My experience with the CDC has been negative. I have Lyme disease clients that go to Lyme disease support groups in California where the CDC says there's no such thing as Lyme disease. I have a client that went to a official CDC doctor in the eastern United States. He only saw her for 15 minutes. She wanted a renewal of an antibiotic that really started to help her. She was on doxycycline for a couple years. That wasn't as effective. She felt really lousy. She had a lot of knee pain and a lot of brain fog, a lot of emotional and mental lability or ups and downs. The minute she went on azithromax, she got better in 3 days. And so my recommendation was that she stay on that as long as it wasn't affecting her liver or anything like that, or kidneys, and that that disease, when it comes back out of remission, is pretty rough. So this Center for Disease Control doctor didn't do any exams, didn't ask any questions, looked at a lab test that they do not recognize, got very upset, and never did an exam. But he did manage to call her personal physician, which he had absolutely no official affiliation or authority to do so, told her doctor that she had no signs of the disease, even though he did not do an exam, and ordered the doctor not to give her the azithromax. And she ended up writing him a letter asking for a retraction, and the plot got really messy after that. If somehow we end up in quarantines for Ebola, it's either for a weaponized strain or it's orchestrated, in my opinion. The chances of a airborne Ebola outbreak in the United States is virtually impossible. It's millions and millions to one. It's you know, you're going to win the lottery before that happens, because this thing presents symptoms early as less than a week. There are longer incubation periods, up to 3 weeks, and those are thought possibly to be due to low level exposure, a healthy immune system, or the controversial oral route. So even a hand contact pathogen is highly, highly unlikely. So it's not airborne. But Ebola, it generally does not survive very well outside the body. Ultraviolet seems to be helpful. Moisture seems to be a vector. There's a lot of crap going on about vitamin C, 500,000 milligrams, and it probably started with me. That somebody got a 0 wrong on that. Do not take 500,000 milligrams of vitamin C. Your maximum oral tolerance is 50,000 milligrams, and that's for a big person. So vitamin C should always, always, always take in with food. Never take it on an empty stomach if you're going to go high dose. If you do have Ebola and you take that high dose on an empty stomach, you will bleed. So the vitamin C is an antiviral, and it deactivates viral replication. And so you could literally, your blood levels fluctuate so radically, you literally could put this thing into remission by adequate dosing and then bring it out of remission. Vitamin C is not a cure. It puts viruses into remission. It works just like a lot of the HIV AIDS medicines do. It prevents replication. So if your blood levels are rising and falling, that's not good. You need to maintain a high blood level using sustained release. Buffered form will be easier on your stomach. Your maximum tolerance, I swear, I promise you, if you get above 50,000, your stomach is going to not like you very much. Always take vitamin C on a full stomach, not on an empty stomach. You start off with timed release to keep your blood levels high, and then you dose higher and higher with the powdered forms to bring about viral deactivation. The colloidal silver must be a true colloidal silver. It must be blue in color. Otherwise, clear is ionized. Ionized usually comes in 90 parts per million. Antiviral doses are up to 1,500 parts per million. So you need to buy a true colloidal silver. Also, another thing that's very good for viruses is gamma globulin, and there has been a run on gamma globulin the last 2 years. Okay, so in conclusion, Ebola has been really well controlled because it's only spread through body fluids. A quarantine should never be necessary for Ebola because people with it have a hard time transmitting it as they get ill quickly. And nobody has sex with somebody with Ebola, vomiting, diarrhea, and high fever. Contaminated blood products is just like HIV. The animal vectors are bats and other mammals. It can probably be spread to wild rodents. They find it in rodents, even prehistoric rodents that are fossilized. This disease is nothing to take for granted. It is a horrible disease. Right now, the strain in Africa is killing 56%. That death rate, if it were to be in the United States, would be a lot lower. We have better medical care and much better conditions here. So if somehow Ebola becomes airborne, that is a weaponized virus. That is the only thing it can be, or it's an overstated infection. Because if Ebola really did, I mean, this pandemic chart would not look this way. The whole Africa would be in trouble. So we want to point out that you will not hemorrhage to death from Ebola. It's bruising. The majority of deaths with this disease come with organ failure, kidney failure, hypovolemia due to dehydration. So do not mistake what this disease is about. We know a lot about it. They have made vaccines. They have given those vaccines to healthcare workers in those areas. They have even given vaccines to animals to prevent them from getting this disease. So we believe a vaccine does exist. It is reported that it takes up to 6 months to develop immunity. So it must be a staged vaccine, much like hepatitis B vaccine. The bleeding and hemorrhaging is overstated. This is what your eyes look like when you have Ebola. It's a bruising more than a hemorrhage. It's no different than some of the other hemorrhagic conditions in terms of the bleeding. So there's a lot of hemorrhagic fevers out there. If there is, or if it were spread by hand contact, just alone, there would be tens of thousands of people dying from this disease in Africa. So this should never be a quarantine situation ever. And if it is, you know something's up.